Hello, my name is Jim Selman. I want to talk with you today and share a few ideas that I've been working on. And the ideas have to do with the question of really what is going on in the world today. Perhaps the most compelling feature of the world today is this notion of accelerating change. Things are happening faster and faster and faster. Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of these high technology companies are having an impact on our real everyday experience of living because things are happening almost faster than we can comprehend them. And when you add to that the whole idea of complexity, the amount of things that are coming at us is almost unconfrontable. There's two other features, though, that are probably maybe a little more subtle, but perhaps even more important. One is that we've lost the ability to trust our predictions and our forecasts about what's going to happen in the future. And as a consequence, we are faced with some questions of how do we make decisions if we can't trust our predictions. I don't know very many companies in the world today that think that they can really rely on their predictions more than maybe half a year, maybe a year at the very most in front of them. And yet, almost every budgeting system in the world is built on the idea of prediction, not to mention our personal budgets and our personal planning and our personal designs on what we really want to have happen in our future. The final characteristic of this world, though, in my thinking, is that we're not really in control. I'm not sure very many people really believe that they have any serious control over the future. So you take these four characteristics of accelerating change, increasing complexity, unpredictability, and lack of control. What does that amount to? Well, it amounts to a world in which we must be able to operate in a different way than we've ever operated in the past. The metaphor that I'm really fond of right now that I'm using is surfing. That as the waves of history are emerging, and they're emerging at ever faster rates, we have to learn, both individually and institutionally, to be able to cope with the unexpected. We need to be able to engage the world in real time. We need to be able to appreciate that there's no way of figuring it out beforehand. And now that the bad news of that is that it leaves a lot of people very, very uncomfortable because we can't rely on the past to tell us what to do in the future. And by the same token, everything that's happening in the future is requiring that we rethink what we've always thought and perhaps have to reinvent the past as well. Now, I call all of this living in a real-time world. When I started my career, I was in computers, and computers were about information and reporting for a long time. But then as they got faster and faster and the space between inputs and outputs got shorter and shorter and shorter, eventually disappeared. And now computers could be used for doing things. They manage control of the processes, the production processes. They are doing things in what we coin the term real-time computing. Now I'm suggesting that today the gap between the future and the past is getting shorter and shorter. And that's why I've coined the term real-time world, or appropriated the word real-time world, to take into account those four characteristics of our life: accelerating change, unpredictability, loss of control, and increasing complexity. Now, one of the questions is, well, what do you do in a real-time world? Or what do you need to do to learn to surf the waves of history? Well, one of the thoughts that I'm thinking of that's perhaps most central to this is going to be sort of counterintuitive. It's what I would call surrender. Now, that word probably at first sort of is jarring because in our current narrative or our current story about life, we think of surrender as a bad thing. We think of it as weak. We are taught from the time we're children to never give up and to stay the course and to trust our resolve no matter what, even if we're stubborn. And it's that belief that we can't surrender, or that it's bad to surrender, or that you're weak if you surrender, is part of what keeps us pushing up against many of the issues that we're just not so far able to make a dent in. Now, it's first of all important to make a distinction between succumbing and surrender. Succumbing is when you're beaten down, when your opposition or the circumstances have just reduced you to where you have to either give up or die. There's no choice involved at all. It's utter defeat. You lose not only your dignity, but you often lose the possibility to continue to play the game. Surrender, on the other hand, is not the same as succumbing. It's not being beaten down, it's making a conscious choice when you see no further possibility of winning the game you're playing. And when you're in that moment choose to surrender, then what you've done is actually made a declaration that can open up the possibility of playing a new game. In fact, until you surrender, there's no possibility of playing a new game. Now, surrender itself is not a thing I'm recommending so much as a product of real, honest examination and thinking. It's rigorous honesty and rigorous thinking about the situation you're in. And when you're in a situation, or a relationship for that matter, in which there's no possibility of things moving, then if you don't surrender, you're fundamentally just resisting. You're trying and hoping and struggling to overcome whatever you think is in the way. But the more you try to struggle, the more the problems continue and they persist. And yet, if you think about it, there's lots and lots of historical examples throughout history where surrender has really where surrender has actually been the beginning of a new era, or a new time, or a new place. Virtually every religious conversion, for example, involves some element of surrender. Bankruptcy in your financial affairs is an example of surrender when you see no possibility of getting out of debt. Now, for some people that means shame and they never recover. On the other hand, for some people it means that they can regroup and restart their game or their enterprise, and can even be more prosperous than they've ever imagined they could be. So surrender is not something to be treated lightly, but it's always got to be a choice or an option if you're going to be able to maintain a healthy and creative relationship with your situation or your circumstances. Finally, if you do think about it, surrender does not mean giving up your dreams. It doesn't mean giving up your ambition. In fact, I've coined a term which I call serene ambition. I put them together to show that it's possible to both live in a state of surrender, or another way of thinking about that is a state of profound acceptance, while at the same time maintaining possibility and being committed to a different world. Serene ambition also, when you enter into that discourse for yourself, serene ambition can allow you to discover many of the other kind of qualities that we admire. As an example, most of us would like to be able to put the past in the past. Well, if you've really surrendered, or you really have accepted life as it is, or whatever the situation is as it is, then there's nothing to regret, there's nothing to resent. Basically, it's a way of letting go of the past, because you can't surrender in any other place except in the present. And if you think of surrender now as a state of being, as distinct from an event or a single decision, then you begin to see that it's really a source of freedom. It's a source of completion. It's a way of being able to maintain a kind of rigorous honesty with yourself. It's also a way of connecting with larger possibilities as a constant. So you're living your life in a context of possibility, as distinct from looking at possibilities as some form of probably unattainable goal. So those are my thoughts, and those are my reflections today. Hope it's useful. Thank you very much.